The method of machine-to-machine communication between applications is an extremely convenient and commonly used way to leverage external third-party services when building applications today. In this tutorial, we will introduce how to use Logto's machine-to-machine application to protect and access your APIs, as well as the Logto Management API. First, create a machine-to-machine application. We navigate to the Logto Cloud Console and go to the Applications tab. Here, we find the machine-to-machine app and click Start Building. In the modal, we enter the name for the machine-to-machine app and click Create Application. A toast notification will appear, informing us of the successful creation and bringing us to the machine-to-machine app guide. We will follow the steps in this guide later. For now, let's click Finish and Done to skip the guide page. Subsequently, we will be redirected to the Details page. We have implemented a simple API on server localhost port 8000. To enable access to this API using the machine-to-machine app we just created, just create the API resource in Logto. We navigate to the API Resource tab and click the Create API Resource button. In the modal, we enter the API name and API identifier respectively. Note that the identifier needs to be consistent with your API endpoint. It will be used as the AUD claim in the JWT Access Tokens payload for API validation. Click Create API Resource to complete the creation. Next, we go to the Permission tab and add different permissions for the API, which will be used for fine-grained management of the machine-to-machine apps API permissions. Here, we add two permissions, hello and bye. After defining permissions for our API, we need to assign the appropriate permissions to the machine-to-machine app through roles. We navigate to the Roles tab and click the Create Role button. We then enter the role name, role description, and select the role type as machine-to-machine app role. Note that user roles cannot be used for machine-to-machine apps. We assign this role all permissions for both the Logto Management API and the newly created My API, and then assign this role to the previously created My First M2M app. By doing this, My First M2M app now has all the permissions for both My API and the Logto Management API. Since in the previous step we assigned all permissions of Logto Management API and My API to My First M2M app, we will next obtain access tokens with different scope and resource. We will use Postman to request the access tokens. In practical use, you can implement the token requests we perform with Postman in your preferred programming language. The token endpoint can be found on the detail page of My First M2M app. Use a post request with the content type of application XWWW form Erlang coded, including the grant type value as client credentials. Add the authorization header with basic authentication, where the credential is base64. Also, specify the resource and scope parameters as per the actual requirements. 1. Get Management API, All Permission Access Token. 2. Get By Permission of My API. 3. Get By and Hello permissions of My API. In the previous step, we obtained 3 access tokens. Now, we will use these access tokens to access the corresponding APIs and understand how to customize the different permission requirements when implementing the API. First, we try to use the access token for the Logto Management API to fetch all applications using the API endpoint Get API Applications. We can successfully retrieve all applications, and this matches the results we see in the console. However, when we use the access token from the Management API to access Get Localhost 8000 API Hello, it throws an AUD claim mismatch error. This is because our custom-implemented API validates that access is only permitted when the AUD matches the current API's audience identifier. Next, we switch to using the access token with the resource set to my API and the scope to buy to access the get localhost 8000 API hello API. We still receive a 401 unauthorized error. This is because the API requires the hello permission for access. Next, we switch to using the access token with the resource set to my API and the scope to buy hello to access the get localhost 8000 API hello API. We successfully received the expected hello world response. Let's take a look at the implementation of the API. After extracting the access token from the authorization header, we perform some basic validations, such as checking if it's expired, if the payload matches the signature, if the issuer is the authorization server, etc. Moreover, when implementing the API, we can perform additional validations on the content of the token. For instance, in this example, we require that the scope claim in the payload contains hello to allow access to the API. In our previous practices, we actually followed the concept of role-based access control. In addition to specifying the permissions of the machine-to-machine app in the Logto console, we also need to perform further validations on the APIs which are accessed by these M2M apps. This approach maximizes the flexibility and security of Logto's machine-to-machine feature. Alright, that concludes our tutorial on machine-to-machine apps. To better utilize the features of Logto's machine-to-machine app, we've demonstrated how it should be used in scenarios with self-implemented APIs. We've provided examples of how to utilize machine-to-machine apps to access the Logto Management API and also briefly introduced the concept of role-based access control in the context of M2M apps. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more tutorials and feature updates. See you next time.